I've lived in Peckham for 13 years. The area's quite diverse and like everyone's very supportive and that you don't feel out of place while being here.
People think that Peckham is a bad place, but it's really not. It's just a family.
At the moment, we're making a film about like the lead up to gentrification within our area, so Peckham/Southwark.
Gentrification is in Peckham everywhere, and it also affects the local people. Like, it takes away from what makes Peckham Peckham.
My grandparents and my great-grandparents were part of the Windrush generation. They found it very hard to travel from Jamaica, Caribbean to Britain and experience a lot of discrimination and racism.
Windrush is the term used for people who came over from the Caribbean in the early 50s and 60s. Later on in the 60s and 70s, many of those African Caribbean people started moving towards Peckham and actually settled here in the 70s.
When the Windrush generation came here, people wouldn't give them somewhere to stay easily. Finding jobs was difficult.
You know, people weren't allowed to rent some of the places that were available at the time.
Windrush generation, yeah, they have helped build this country, build the systems, you know, worked in hospitals, worked in transport.
But also, you got to sit and think about the reason why immigrants come here. Because, you know, for example, those who are coming here from other countries are coming because obviously this country has, you know, has a hand in their politics. Immigrants also add to the melting pot of an area, you know, and as you can see, every area is different. And that's because you have different pockets of, you know, communities settling in those areas, and they're forming what I call the ingredient of that local community.
I'm from the ends where man got shanked for the night tick. I was on Peckham before you liked it. Emotion, yeah, I used to hide it. Now I jump on a mic and highlight it.
I think that we have a really unique like influence that many places don't have. You know, we've got like all these different cultures. You just think of Africa as a continent, how many different genres and different styles of music, etc., come from there, and all the people from that continent. You think of like the Caribbean, etc. You got that, and you put it all together in like inner cities or whatever, you're just gonna get incredible music. You're gonna get bangers because there's so much influence from different places. Yeah, I feel I'm lucky that I come from here because of that.
You know, young people playing Afrobeat and then it becoming popular. You know, and if you look at a lot of the Afrobeat artists, again, that's the impact of immigration. But then, how many can afford to perform in Peckham? Not really any space for them to. I know a local Afrobeat artist who's from Peckham who doesn't live in Peckham anymore. Because one, it's becoming unaffordable. Two, you know, if you do want to put on an event, you know, you have to go through the police, event promoters and the whole shebang before you even pick up the microphone. Sometimes gentrification makes things more difficult than what it is.
The difference between the nightlife when I was younger to now, I would say just the way the night looks is different. Generally, it's apartheid. Do you know what I mean? Generally, you go there in the day on a Saturday, yeah? There's enough black people, brown people, you know, white working class people, enough aunties with their bags onto the high street, you know what I'm saying? When it's nighttime, it is Caucasian city. Sometimes I'm there and I'm like, oh, please nobody ask me for drugs. Please nobody do that to me. It feels invasive, all of those people, because it's like the lack of respect and care for the area. Like, you know where you can tell it the most sometimes is in chicken shops. There was one guy and he was getting so rude to boss man, yeah? And I was like, how dare you? How dare you be so rude to boss man? He is nicing up the community for longer than you've been here, and you have the nerve to just act like, nah, I don't like it. They'll be cussing the area, but also wanting to come to the bars there. So they just see it like they're some playground that they come into and then leave. You know what I'm saying?
It would be wrong to say they don't bring anything, because that's you can't just write off whole groups of people. I suppose it's different priorities that it's brought in. and just unaffordable homes.
Most people I know that grew up with, that I know that lived in Peckham, well, the key word is lived, they don't live in Peckham anymore. And I think that's a weird thing when you can't even live in an area that you grew up in.
You know, I live on a council estate. I certainly couldn't afford to buy my property. And the homes next door to here, you know, we're talking about over £1 million.
East Dulwich area has become very gentrified now. And slowly it's coming into Peckham already. It's being gentrified. And, you know, we are slowly losing a lot of the shops, local shops that we had that sold, you know, things that we were used to. They're slowly going.
It's contradictory really, isn't it? Because the reason you like this area is because there's like diverse array of people, there's artists making this thing pop, there's all of these things like independent people, freelancers, people trying to run businesses, etc. But it costs so much money, those people are not going to be able to afford to be here. So then what you're going to have to make your area cool?
I think there's always been changes. I just think that since, you know, this area became what is called a new opportunity area, it brought in capitalist investors who say that they're interested in the community but are not, are really, you know, really just trying to capitalize on the land and on the buildings that are here and don't really have regards for the local community. And if they did, you know, they wouldn't, you know, be putting in infrastructures that would push them out.
The council, the government, etc., like trying to sell people a dream, you know, they'll knock down like an estate or like, you know, a bunch of social housing and they'll act like, oh, we're improving it, like developing it, you know. Really what you're doing is just social cleansing, do you know what I'm saying? Because then you'll rebuild it and you'll act like, oh, we're gonna just rebuild it so it's better for you. But then when they rebuild it, only a tiny percentage is social housing and all the rest are like flats, apartments, etc. that cost bare money. I think it's kind of like people need to stop doing this fake news thing when they're like, oh, we're doing it to improve the area. It's like, for who? Who are you improving it for?
So when I came here probably 32 years ago, and I remember it was hard to let, you know, and now that's all changed and all of a sudden it's like people who would never want to live here are now wanting to move here. And I think, and then that has its own consequences.
The idea of absorbing the culture is attractive, but I think the idea of actually mixing with the people that make that culture isn't as attractive. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people don't venture, or almost when they venture out, it's almost like they're going on safari to Peckham.
You know, we need to look at how we empower young people like yourselves who've grown up in this area, who might then be forced out of the area, and how do we educate and empower your, you know, younger people to be able to adapt to the future demands.
Even like projects like this and projects working with young people, working with like the future of what the scene will look like in Peckham, you know, in 5 years. Like, to be honest, it's gonna be people, it's gonna be you guys, young people growing up. And I just hope that like young people don't suddenly have to like abandon their area because their area isn't providing for them.
I had this naive idea that if I looked after my next door neighbour and my next door neighbour looked after me, I'd never have to worry about myself, because there's always, and I know that sounds very naive now, but it's a concept that I would like people to get their heads around.
I think I would like to see a community, regardless of whether you're rich, poor, black, white, you know, whatever gender you are, being able to happily be in a community like Old Kent Road. The most important thing is obviously watching young people like yourselves growing up and able to be buying houses locally and not feel that you're being priced out.
I hope that in 5 years, Peckham hasn't driven out communities of artists further out. And if it does do that, I hope it remembers people that grew up here that wish they could live here but can't live here now.